I honestly thought the whole thing would blow over by Monday, but apparently, everyone at TechFlow has the memory of an elephant when it comes to workplace drama. The way people were acting, you'd think I'd committed some heinous crime instead of just standing up for myself at a stupid happy hour. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. It started because I was actually trying to be social for once. Usually, I skip the company happy hours because they're full of awkward small talk and people pretending to like each other. But my manager Rachel had been making these passive-aggressive comments about team bonding and participation. So when she announced we were going to Ollie's after work on Friday, I figured I'd show my face, have one drink, and leave early. Ollie's is this dive bar downtown that smells like stale beer and broken dreams. The kind of place where the floor sticks to your shoes, and you're not sure if it's from spilled drinks or just decades of accumulated grime. But it's cheap and close to the office, so that's where all the tech startups go to pretend they're still cool and scrappy. I ended up sitting next to Marcus, this junior developer who usually tries to avoid me. I get it. I can be a lot sometimes. I'm passionate about what I do, I speak my mind, and apparently that makes some people uncomfortable. Marcus is one of those quiet programmer types who probably still lives with his mom and thinks energy drinks count as a food group. But he'd actually helped me debug this nightmare ticket a few weeks back, so I figured maybe we could have a normal conversation for once. And honestly, it was going pretty well. I was keeping my voice at a reasonable level instead of my usual projection, and we were actually bonding over how incompetent our managers are. He made some joke about my Guinness making me look like an old man, which was actually kind of funny, and I teased him about his terrible karaoke voice from the last office party. He laughed at that, and I started thinking maybe I'd misjudged him. Maybe he wasn't as boring as I thought. We ordered another round and some nachos that looked like they'd been sitting under a heat lamp since the Clinton administration. But, whatever, the alcohol was making everything seem more tolerable. We started sharing embarrassing childhood stories, and I admitted to going through a phase where I wore fingerless gloves everywhere, because I thought they made me look edgy. He told me about getting married to someone in some online game called RuneScape, which was actually hilarious and kind of sweet in a pathetic way. I was starting to think Marcus might actually be cute in that nerdy, harmless way. Like maybe there was potential there, you know? I'd been single for months and tired of the dating apps full of guys who couldn't handle a strong woman. Marcus seemed different, quieter, maybe more manageable. The bar was getting crowded, packed like sardines with the usual Friday night crowd of office workers trying to forget their meaningless jobs. People were bumping into each other constantly, and the bartenders were clearly overwhelmed. That's when this guy with an armload of beers came stumbling through, clearly already a few drinks in. I was reaching for my vodka cranberry when this idiot just plowed right into me. His elbow caught my wrist perfectly, and my drink went flying across the bar like a red meteor. It splashed all over the floor, all over my white blouse, and left me sitting there empty-handed, while this moron just kept walking like nothing happened. I couldn't believe it. The audacity. He didn't even pause, didn't even acknowledge what he'd done. Just kept pushing through the crowd, like he owned the place. So I called out to him, loud enough to be heard over the music and chatter. "Hey, you going to apologize or what?" Half the people around us turned to look, including Marcus, who suddenly looked like he wanted to disappear into his bar stool. The guy stopped and turned around with this confused expression, like he genuinely had no idea what I was talking about. What?" he said, blinking at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "You just spilled my drink," I said, gesturing to the mess on the floor and my stained shirt. It wasn't complicated. Basic human decency dictates that when you bump into someone and ruin their drink, you apologize and maybe offer to buy them a new one. But instead of doing the right thing, this guy just waved his hand dismissively and started to turn away. Like I wasn't even worth his time. Like I was some annoying gnat he could just swat away. That's when I lost it. I pushed off my bar stool and grabbed his shoulder with both hands. Not hard, just enough to get his attention. He stumbled a little, but managed to save most of his beers, then muttered something under his breath that made my blood boil. Jesus, crazy bitch. He said it quietly, probably thought I couldn't hear him over the noise, but I have excellent hearing. And that word, crazy, that's my trigger. I've been called crazy my whole life just for standing up for myself, for having opinions, for refusing to be a doormat. It's what weak men say when they can't handle a woman with backbone. Something snapped inside me. Before I could think about it, I pulled back and threw a punch right at his smug face. I'd been taking kickboxing classes for 2 years, sparring with guys twice my size, so I knew how to throw a proper jab. I caught him right on the cheekbone, a solid hit that made a satisfying smacking sound. The reaction was immediate. Several people gasped, conversations stopped, and suddenly there was this bubble of silence around us in the crowded bar. The guy staggered back, more from surprise than pain, and carefully set down 2 of his beers. Then he put his hand on my shoulder. Not a punch, just an open palm push to create some space between us. It was controlled, almost gentle, but I was already off balance from throwing the punch and the floor was sticky with spilled drinks. My knees buckled, and I went down hard. Now, I'll admit, I might have played it up a little bit. When you're already falling, why not make it look good? I let myself collapse completely, like a soccer player taking a dive, and made sure to let the tears start flowing immediately. Mascara running down my cheeks, the whole 9 yards. He assaulted me, I cried out, loud enough for everyone to hear. The effect was immediate and satisfying. The bartender froze mid-pour, and this massive bouncer with a shaved head came over looking like he'd dealt with this exact situation 100 times before. The guy who'd pushed me threw his hands up like he was being arrested, panic written all over his face. "She punched me first, man," he said, which was technically true but completely missed the point. I looked around for support, for someone to back me up, and my eyes landed on Marcus. Poor Marcus, who 2 minutes earlier had been planning to ask me out for ice cream after karaoke. He was staring at me with this expression I couldn't quite read, and when I looked at him pleadingly, he did something that absolutely shocked me. He nodded, slowly, carefully, like he was defusing a bomb. But he was nodding at the guy, agreeing with him. I felt like I'd been slapped. Marcus, who I'd been flirting with all night, who I thought was finally seeing the real me, was taking this stranger's side over mine. It was such a betrayal I almost forgot to keep crying. The bouncer stepped in with that tired, authoritative tone that said he'd broken up 1,000 bar fights. "All right, everyone out. Let's go." Outside in the cool night air, I tried to salvage the situation. Marcus walked me to the curb, probably out of some misguided sense of chivalry, and I kept sobbing about being assaulted. But when I looked at him for sympathy, for validation, all I got was brutal honesty. "To be fair, Katie, you did hit him first." The way he said it, so matter-of-fact, so calm, it was worse than if he'd yelled at me. I stared at him, waiting for him to take it back, to remember that he was supposed to be on my side. But he just stood there, looking uncomfortable and slightly disappointed. "So you're taking his side," I said, and it wasn't really a question. He didn't answer, which was answer enough. I walked away from him after that, my heels clicking angrily on the sidewalk, leaving him standing there looking like a lost puppy. The whole weekend was torture. I kept checking my phone, scrolling through social media, waiting for someone to reach out and ask if I was okay, but nothing. Radio silence from everyone at work, including Marcus. I played the whole scene over and over in my head, and each time it made me angrier. How dare that guy disrespect me like that? How dare Marcus not defend me? By Monday morning, I was ready for the whispers and stares. What I wasn't ready for was being called into Rachel's office first thing. She had that tight-lipped expression she gets when she's trying not to lose her temper. And I knew someone had talked. "Katie, we need to discuss what happened Friday night," she said, gesturing for me to sit down. I played dumb at first, but she'd obviously gotten the full story from multiple witnesses. For 40 minutes, she lectured me about professional behavior and company image and legal liability. The whole time I sat there thinking about how unfair it all was, how I was being punished for defending myself, while that guy got to walk away scot-free. In the end, I got off with a warning. Basically, we don't want lawsuits, but don't do that again. but I could tell from Rachel's tone that I was on thin ice. One more incident and I'd be updating my LinkedIn profile. When I came out of her office, I could feel everyone's eyes on me. Marcus and his little programmer buddies were clustered around the coffee machine, whispering like middle school girls. I caught fragments of their conversation as I walked by. If it was one of us throwing punches at happy hour, we'd be job hunting already. She only kept her job because it wasn't another employee. Dude, she's lucky that guy didn't press charges. The injustice of it burned in my chest. Here I was, the victim of an assault, and everyone was acting like I was the problem. Like I should have just sat there and let some drunk idiot disrespect me without consequences. But something about that day, about seeing the way everyone looked at me, about feeling so completely alone and unsupported, it did something to me. Not exactly humbling, because I still believed I was in the right, but it made me realize that maybe my approach needed some adjustment. So I made changes. Strategic changes. I quit the kickboxing gym because it was expensive anyway, and I stopped posting workout selfies on Instagram because they weren't getting the engagement they used to. I stopped talking about being able to take any man in the office during lunch breaks, not because I couldn't, but because apparently people couldn't handle that kind of confidence from a woman. I started asking for help more often, playing up the just a girl trying to figure it out angle that seemed to make people more comfortable. I brought in homemade cookies and muffins because apparently feeding people makes them forget that you have a backbone. I laughed louder at other people's jokes and kept my voice softer during meetings. It worked, sort of. After about 3 months, people seemed to relax around me again. The whispers died down, and I wasn't getting those suspicious looks anymore. Even Marcus started making normal small talk with me again, though he never asked me out for ice cream or anything else. But the whole thing left a bitter taste in my mouth that never quite went away. I'd learned that standing up for yourself as a woman in the workplace comes with consequences that men never have to face. That guy who spilled my drink probably never thought about that night again, while I had to completely alter my personality to keep my job. The worst part was how everyone acted like I should be grateful for the lesson. Like getting knocked down in a dirty bar and humiliated in front of my coworkers was some kind of character-building experience. Like I needed to be taken down a peg for my own good. Marcus still works 2 cubicles over from me, still gives me polite nods in the hallway, still helps with debugging when I ask nicely enough. But sometimes I catch him looking at me with this expression, like he's seeing something I don't want him to see. Like he knows exactly who I really am underneath all the homemade brownies and helpful girl act. And maybe that's the most infuriating part of all. Not that I had to change, but that everyone seems to prefer this fake, diminished version of me. This smaller, quieter, more palatable Katie who brings snacks and asks for help and never raises her voice unless it's to laugh at someone else's mediocre joke. I still think about that night sometimes, about how different things might have been if just one person had backed me up. If Marcus had stood up and said, "Hey, that guy was out of line," instead of nodding along with my attacker. If the bouncer had bothered to ask for my side of the story. If Rachel had shown even a shred of concern for my safety instead of just worrying about company liability. But that's not the world we live in, apparently. We live in a world where women get punished for fighting back, where standing up for yourself gets you labeled as difficult or crazy or problematic, where you have to smile and bake cookies and pretend to be helpless if you want people to like you. So that's what I do now. I smile and I bake, and I ask for help with things I could easily handle myself. I let Marcus explain coding concepts to me that I already understand, and I laugh when he makes jokes that aren't funny. I've become everything I used to despise, all because one drunk asshole couldn't be bothered to apologize for spilling my drink. The really twisted part is that everyone thinks this is growth. Rachel makes comments about how much I've matured, how I've really found my place on the team. My coworkers seem more comfortable around me, more willing to include me in conversations and after-work plans. Even my mom, when I told her a carefully edited version of the story, said she was proud of me for learning to pick my battles. But they're all wrong. This isn't growth or maturity or learning to be a team player. This is survival. This is what happens when a strong woman gets beaten down by a system that can't handle her authentic self. This is me in witness protection, hiding from who I really am because the truth is too threatening for everyone around me. And the most maddening part is that I'm good at it. I'm really good at being this version of myself that everyone prefers. The helpful, sweet, slightly vulnerable Katie who needs guidance and brings treats and never causes problems. It's like method acting, except the role never ends, and the audience never realizes they're watching a performance. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd just let that guy walk away without saying anything. If I'd sat there with my ruined shirt and empty glass and swallowed my pride like a good girl. Maybe Marcus would have bought me another drink, and we'd have had that ice cream date. Maybe I'd still be posting gym selfies and speaking my mind in meetings without watching everyone's faces for signs of disapproval. But then I remember the look on that guy's face when he called me crazy. The dismissive wave of his hand, the way he turned his back on me, like I was nothing. And I know I couldn't have just let it slide. Some things are worth fighting for. Even if you're fighting alone, even if you lose, even if the cost is higher than you ever imagined. The problem is that nobody else sees it that way. They see a woman who overreacted, who escalated a minor incident into a major scene, who embarrassed herself and her company in front of strangers. They see someone who needed to be taught a lesson about consequences and appropriate behavior. What they don't see is a woman who refused to be invisible, who demanded basic respect, who stood up to someone who thought he could treat her like garbage. They don't see the courage it took to throw that punch, even though it was probably stupid. They don't see the strength it takes to keep showing up to work every day, knowing that everyone thinks less of you. But I see it. I know what really happened that night, and I know that despite everything that followed, despite all the ways I've had to change and compromise and shrink myself down, I was right to demand an apology. I was right to refuse to be treated like I didn't matter. And someday, maybe, I'll find a way to be that person again without losing everything in the process. Someday, I'll work somewhere that values authenticity over compliance. Somewhere that doesn't punish women for having the audacity to take up space and speak up for themselves. Until then, I'll keep baking cookies and asking for help and laughing at bad jokes. I'll keep playing the part everyone wants me to play, because apparently that's the price of admission to a world that was never designed for women like me in the first place. But I'll never forget who I really am underneath it all. And I'll never stop believing that I deserved better than what I got that night at Ollie's, even if I'm the only one who thinks so.